Here's the cold truth. No one warns you about. Sometimes the deadliest attack you'll ever face comes with a smile. It won't raise its voice. It won't draw a sword. It will wrap itself in silk, whisper your name like a friend, and flatter you until your guard falls down by your own hands. Because what most people call kindness, Machiavelli called strategic warfare. You see, the courts of Renaissance Italy were filled with people who smiled while plotting your downfall. And today, those same tactics live on in your office, in your friend group, on your social media feed, the weapon compliments. But not the ones that uplift you. No, the ones that redefine you without your consent. Compliments that sound like encouragement, but secretly question your worth. Praise that makes you smile, while quietly rewriting your story. If you don't recognize these disguised insults, you are already submitting to them. Because every time you thank someone for these carefully crafted words, you're accepting the role they've chosen for you. A role designed to limit your power, not expand it. This isn't just a social game. This is how control spreads invisible, undetected, and permanent until one day you realize you've been living in a narrative someone else wrote for you. The question is, will you keep playing the part they assigned, or will you finally wake up and write your own? It sounds like a compliment, a kind observation. You're so much better than you used to be. At first, it fills you with warmth. You imagine growth, evolution, improvement. But pause for a second. Why are they reminding you of your past in the first place? Who asked them to compare you to the weaker version of yourself? Because beneath that soft praise is a subtle power play. They aren't celebrating your present. They're taking ownership of your story. Think about it. Every time someone says this, they're framing your progress as something they observed, something they judged, something they now validate. They are placing themselves in the seat of the observer, the judge, the scorekeeper. And where does that leave you? In the defendant's chair, constantly proving that you've changed, constantly defending your evolution. They've made your growth conditional on their approval. And that's where the trap begins. Machiavelli understood this perfectly. He knew that whoever controls your narrative controls your mind. By constantly referencing your former weakness, they anchor you to a past version of yourself that you may have long left behind, but now they drag it back into the room like a shadow that won't disappear. And here's the dangerous part. If you try to correct them, explain yourself, or prove how far you've come, you've already lost. You've fallen into their frame. You're reacting, not leading. And a reactive mind is the easiest kind of mind to guide. This compliment works because it injects two opposing feelings into your heart: pride and shame. You feel proud that you've grown, but ashamed of what you once were. And when those two feelings collide, they create insecurity, an emotional leverage point that can be pulled anytime you start feeling too confident. This is not just about compliments. This is about identity warfare. So what's the Machiavellian response? Simple. Smile but do not explain. Accept the surface compliment, but reject the framing beneath it. You owe no one an explanation of your growth. Your past does not define your present unless you allow others to bring it into the conversation. They can remind you of your scars, but only if you let them. True power is not in denying your past, but in refusing to be trapped by it. Because the second you need their validation to feel strong, you've already handed them the strings to your mind. It sounds harmless, almost sweet. You're actually really smart. You might smile, nod, maybe even thank them. But pause. One word in that sentence changes everything. Actually, that word is the quiet knife. It doesn't cut loudly. It slips beneath your defenses and reminds you without saying it directly that they expected something less. They had already put you in a box, one labeled not intelligent, and now they're surprised you escaped it. This isn't a compliment about your intelligence, it's an admission of their low expectations. And they want you to thank them for it. Think about what they've done here. Instead of giving you credit for your intelligence as a fact, they frame it as an exception. You are smart, not absolutely, but relative to their previous judgment of you. This reframes your achievement, your insight, your power as an accident, a surprise, something they never expected to see. And now, without realizing it, you start measuring yourself against the low bar they set. You become the person they almost wrote off but decided to give a chance. And in that moment, your success no longer feels solid. It feels conditional. Machiavelli would call this a status anchor. In any social hierarchy, people try to fix others into predictable roles. They don't like surprises. They want to know who they're dealing with. And when you rise too quickly, when your power starts to grow beyond what they predicted, they panic. So they compliment you, but in a way that reminds you where they first placed you. It's a leash disguised as praise. And the more you accept it, the more you reinforce their narrative. You become the underdog who should be grateful for recognition, not the peer who earned respect. This is how power games work in subtle, everyday conversations. It happens in offices, in classrooms, in families. Someone will remind you who you used to be so they can control who you're allowed to become. If you aren't careful, you'll spend your life trying to prove to them that you're smarter, better, stronger, when in reality, you don't owe them a single ounce of proof. So what's the Machiavellian response? You acknowledge the compliment outwardly, but inside you reject the frame. Your intelligence is not a surprise. It's your standard. You weren't lucky to be smart. You were underestimated by someone who misread you. And now their realization doesn't elevate you. It exposes them. At first glance, it feels like a compliment meant to empower your independence. I love how you don't care what anyone thinks. You hear it, and for a moment it feels like validation, like someone is admiring your courage to be yourself. But slow down, listen carefully. What are they really saying? What they're doing is far more calculated. They're framing your independence as a form of social blindness, not boldness, not clarity, but detachment, weirdness, isolation. Hidden inside this praise is a warning to the crowd. This person doesn't fit in. It's a subtle way of putting you outside the tribe, not as a leader standing apart, but as an outsider who doesn't understand the rules. It makes your confidence look like social ignorance. Suddenly, your authenticity is no longer a strength, it's a liability. And here's the cruel irony: the moment you try to explain yourself or reconnect with the group, it looks like you're insecure. The trap closes from both sides. Machiavelli warned about this centuries ago. He knew that standing apart from the crowd could protect your power, but only if you controlled the frame. The danger is when others frame you, first making your difference seem awkward, not powerful. In social hierarchies, this is how people disarm the threat of someone who doesn't play by their rules. They turn your independence into a spectacle. You're not admired, you're displayed. You're not free, you're isolated. You'll see this tactic everywhere if you look. In high school cafeterias where the independent kid is labeled strange. In corporate meetings where the challenger of bad ideas is called difficult. Even online where creators who speak their minds are praised for their bravery while quietly being excluded from the mainstream. This is not admiration. It's containment. So what's the Machiavellian response? Maintain your difference but take back the narrative. If they call you fearless, show them discipline, not recklessness. If they label you detached, show them strategic silence, not social cluelessness. Control your image before someone else sells it on your behalf. Remember, you don't lose power by standing apart. You lose it by letting others explain why you're standing there. In every social circle, the group needs an outsider. But only a fool lets the group define what that outsider represents. Machiavelli would remind you, be different. But never so different that they can name you before you name yourself. You're lucky to be so confident. At first, this sounds like admiration. A compliment meant to highlight your ease, your charisma, your calm presence. But pause and dissect what's really happening. The moment they say lucky, they erase everything you built. They steal the long nights of self-doubt, the countless failures you learned from the silent battles you fought when no one was watching. And in one breath, they replace it with fate, chance, as if your confidence wasn't earned but handed to you by the universe like a gift you didn't deserve. This is not praise. This is theft. They're doing two things at once, and you must see both clearly. First, they publicly acknowledge your confidence so they appear gracious. It lets them look humble, supportive, kind. But second, and far more insidious, they frame your confidence as something you stumbled into, not something you earned. Which means they don't have to respect the work. They only have to envy the outcome. In Machiavellian terms, this is reputation control. They weaken your power by framing it as an accident of fate, not the result of discipline and struggle. Because if your confidence is luck, then they can excuse their lack of it. They don't have to train, adapt, grow. They simply tell themselves, if I had your luck, I'd be just as confident. It's a psychological shortcut for their insecurity disguised as kindness. But the trap goes deeper. If you defend yourself and say, no, I worked hard for this confidence, you sound arrogant, self-centered, boastful. But if you accept the compliment silently, you let their narrative stick. Either way, the frame is set. That's the brilliance of this tactic. It limits your ability to respond without looking weak or prideful. So what's the Machiavellian response? You smile, but you do not explain. Instead, you let them sit in their ignorance. Maybe you answer with a line sharp enough to leave them guessing luck costs more than most people can afford, or you say nothing at all because sometimes the mystery of your journey is more powerful than the details of your struggle. Never let anyone reframe your success as luck. Confidence is a discipline, not a dice roll. And the moment you start explaining your effort, you trade power for validation. Machiavelli would remind you, never explain your victories. Let them guess how you won. At first it sounds noble, protective even. You're too good for this job, too good for that person, too good for the people in this room. It wraps itself in admiration, like someone's looking out for your best interests. But underneath this velvet praise lies a silent knife cutting the very foundation you're standing on, because this phrase isn't meant to lift you up. It's meant to pull you away. Here's the danger. Most people miss this compliment plants dissatisfaction like a seed in your mind. Suddenly your job feels beneath you. Your friends feel unworthy. Your partner feels like a mistake. What once felt like enough now feels small. Not because it changed, but because someone reframed it for you. This is emotional sabotage dressed up as loyalty. It convinces you that the life you've built isn't good enough, that your current path is holding you back, and the people beside you are dragging you down. And who benefits when you leave all that behind? The one who whispered it into your ear. Machiavelli warned about these people centuries ago. He called them agents of instability. They praise you just enough to make you leave your stronghold, just enough to make you question the ground beneath your feet. And when you step away alone, vulnerable, searching for something bigger, they step into the gap you left behind. Because their loyalty was never to your growth. It was to their chessboard, their strategy, their next move. This tactic is especially dangerous because it flatters your pride. It makes you feel rare, special, destined for more. And who doesn't want to believe that? But pride unchecked blinds you to the consequences. Many people have walked away from stable careers, loyal friendships, and meaningful relationships simply because someone told them they deserved more. But they didn't leave for more. They left for nothing and lost everything. So what's the Machiavellian response? Guard your position like a fortress. If you leave, leave on your terms, not because someone handed you a crown made of air. Ask yourself, who wins if I walk away? If the answer is anyone but you, stay still. Silence your pride. Because sometimes loyalty to your present is the strongest power move of all. Machiavelli would remind you, true power isn't in chasing what's better. It's in mastering what you already have. It sounds like the sweetest compliment in the world. You always brighten the room. A phrase that seems to wrap you in warmth, making you feel like your presence alone lifts the energy of everyone around you. But what they don't tell you is this: the moment they define you as the light, they've also defined the limits of who you're allowed to be. You are now trapped in their expectation of joy. And the second you are anything else, silent, serious, tired, reflective, they will wonder, what's wrong with you? This is how identity becomes performance. You are no longer a human being with full emotional range. You are a role that must be played on command. And if you don't play it, people withdraw their approval. Not always loudly, not always directly, but with quiet disappointment, with absence, with judgment. In their minds, your silence becomes selfish, your seriousness becomes a problem. because you failed to deliver the light they expected from you. Machiavelli understood the danger of becoming a performer in the court. The moment the prince becomes the court jester, always amusing, always cheerful, always pleasing the courtiers, stop fearing him and start consuming him. They demand his performance as if it were their right. And when he stops smiling, they turn on him. You'll see this everywhere in modern life. The friend who's the funny one but isn't allowed to be sad. The leader who's praised for charisma but condemned for being firm. The woman who's told she lights up the room, yet criticized the moment she claims space for herself. These compliments aren't gifts. They are cages lined with velvet. So what's the Machiavellian response? Keep your inner life private. Let your energy be unpredictable. Some days you smile, some days you observe, and you never explain the difference. Because your value is not their comfort. Your power is not their entertainment. Smile when it serves you. Withdraw when it doesn't. Control your presence like a weapon, sometimes warming, sometimes cold, but always your decision. Machiavelli would remind you the most dangerous person in the room is the one whose mood you cannot predict. Because no one controls the light, but the one who holds the switch. Few compliments feel more flattering today than this. You're so real. In a world of curated selfies, corporate speak, and fake smiles, being called real feels like a rare badge of honor. It strokes your ego. It makes you feel like you've been seen for who you truly are, authentic, raw, unapologetic. But pause. Step back. Because in the hands of the wrong person, this compliment isn't a crown. It's a trapdoor. Here's how it works. When someone calls you real, they are subtly framing everyone else as fake. They're pulling you into an unspoken alliance. It's you and them against the crowd, against the phonies, the sellouts, the performers. And at first, it feels like connection, like finally someone gets you. But Machiavelli would see through this instantly. This is not connection, this is grooming. Because once you step into that alliance, the narrative shifts. They start pointing out who's changed, who's sold out, who's chasing approval. They frame themselves as your only honest mirror. And suddenly, you are no longer just authentic. You're isolated. The people who once supported you now feel distant. You're no longer part of the room, you're watching it from the outside. And worst of all, you don't trust anyone but them. This is textbook divide and conquer. By praising your realness, they've cut you off from the group. By making you feel morally superior, they've blinded you to your own vulnerability. You feel powerful because you see through the fake world. But what you don't realize is that you've stepped into their frame of reality, where they control who you trust and who you don't. You'll see this tactic in toxic friendships, in manipulative relationships, in political circles, even in influencer culture. People who call you real while pointing out everyone else's flaws are not celebrating your authenticity. They're weaponizing it. Because once you believe you're the only honest one left, you'll cling to them for truth. And that's when the real manipulation begins. So what's the Machiavellian response? Stay grounded. Accept that no one is 100% real, including yourself. Stay aware when someone praises your integrity, but uses it to feed your contempt. True authenticity doesn't isolate, it liberates. And anyone who frames your honesty as a reason to distrust the world is building a cage they can control. Machiavelli would remind you, the person who praises your purity may be the one poisoning your mind. We're taught from childhood to fear insults, to brace ourselves against harsh words, cruel jokes, and public criticism. But Machiavelli understood something far darker. Insults only hurt when you see them coming. Compliments destroy you when you don't. That's why the most dangerous power moves are not loud attacks, but soft praise. Insults trigger your defenses. Compliments slip beneath them, quietly reshaping your identity without resistance. Think about it. No one trains you to question a compliment. No one teaches you to analyze praise. So you drop your guard, you smile, you thank them. And in that moment, something subtle happens. You allow them to redefine who you are. Because every compliment doesn't just describe you. It frames you. It tells you what role you're supposed to play from now on. You're so smart might sound empowering, but what happens when you make a mistake? Now you're not just human, you're a disappointment. You're always positive. Feels good until the day you feel tired or serious and suddenly people withdraw. You're so humble sounds pure, but what happens the day you confidently state your opinion? You're accused of arrogance. This is the trap Machiavelli warned leaders about. Once people assign you a role, they expect you to stay in it. And the moment you step outside, they punish you. Not always with words, but with social withdrawal, disapproval, or subtle rejection. Compliments, when weaponized, become chains. Beautiful chains, silk-wrapped chains, but chains nonetheless. And here's the most dangerous part. Because compliments feel good, you'll work harder to earn them again. You'll adjust your behavior, your words, your energy, just to stay in the role others have praised. Over time, you stop being yourself. You become their version of you. And most people never realize it happened. So what's the Machiavellian response? It's not rejection. That's emotional. It's not confrontation. That's predictable. It's awareness. Quiet, cold awareness. You smile at the compliment. You thank them outwardly. But inside, you ask, what role are they trying to lock me into? And do I accept it? The compliments that empower you give you freedom. The ones that define you take it away. And if you don't see the difference, you'll spend your life trying to protect an identity that was never truly yours. Machiavelli would remind you power doesn't come from applause. It comes from refusing to be caged by it. When someone praises you in a way that quietly limits you, your first instinct might be to argue. To defend your effort, explain your story, prove that your value is greater than the frame they just put around you. But Machiavelli would tell you that this is the exact reaction they want. Because the moment you explain yourself, you've accepted their narrative as the starting point. You are no longer defining the conversation. You are responding to it. And in power dynamics, the responder is already one step behind. So what's the true counter to a weaponized compliment? Awareness. Not defense, not confrontation, just quiet, surgical awareness. When someone says, "You're lucky to be so confident," don't explain your struggle. Smile. Let the silence hang. When they say, "You always brighten the room," don't promise to keep doing it. Let them sit in the unknown of who you'll be tomorrow. When they tell you, "You're too good for this place," don't agree or disagree. Simply stay where you are and let your presence speak for itself. This is the essence of Machiavellian strategy. Never fight a framing battle on someone else's terms. Compliments are designed to define you. If you argue, you reinforce the frame. If you accept without thought, you fall into it. But if you observe, just observe, you rob their words of power. Ask yourself 3 questions every time someone flatters you. What role does this compliment assign me? Who benefits if I believe this about myself? Does this praise empower me, or does it define me? Because here's the truth, praise that empowers you leaves you free to be many things. A leader, a thinker, a human. Praise that defines you boxes you into one thing and punishes you when you step outside of it. The Machiavellian mind stays neutral, outwardly gracious, inwardly detached. You don't owe anyone your emotional reaction. Sometimes the most powerful move is to let them think they succeeded while you quietly step out of the role they gave you. Machiavelli would remind you power isn't always about domination. Sometimes it's about absence. The absence of emotional reaction, the absence of predictable behavior, the absence of confirmation that their words worked. And in that silence, you become untouchable. Most people imagine manipulation happening in grand moments, corporate betrayals, political schemes, public confrontations. But the truth is, the most effective control happens in the small, quiet moments of daily life. It happens in the words people speak when no one's looking, in the compliments that seem innocent, but subtly assign you a lifelong role. And the most dangerous part, you think they're being kind. Take this one. You're such a good listener. At first it feels respectful, appreciative, but look deeper. Are they thanking you for understanding them or for not interrupting them? Are they celebrating your empathy or rewarding your silence? Because buried inside that compliment is a quiet message. Stay in this lane. Stay quiet while I speak. Don't challenge me. Over time, you begin to believe that your greatest value is listening, not leading. that your power comes from accepting other people's narratives, not creating your own. And that is how hierarchies are built, not through open control, but through subtle reinforcement of roles. Or take this phrase, "You're so humble for someone like you." It sounds like a celebration of your modesty, but it carries a blade. The phrase "someone like you" implies that your success should have made you arrogant. That humility is unexpected in a person of your position. And now, without realizing it, people begin to suspect that your confidence might be hiding arrogance. Your humility is framed as an exception, not your default. You find yourself over-explaining your intentions, downplaying your success, softening your power just to maintain the image they assigned you. And then there's this classic trap. You're too nice for this world. It feels poetic, even tragic. But what it really says is, you're not strong enough to survive. It's not praise. It's a eulogy for your power. The message beneath the words is clear. Your kindness will destroy you. Your virtue is beautiful but naive. And once you internalize that belief, you will begin to withdraw from power, avoid conflict, and sabotage your own success, all to protect a goodness they've already decided cannot win. So what's the Machiavellian response to these daily traps? Don't reject the compliment. Reject the frame. Smile. Thank them if you wish. But in your mind, stay free. Your kindness does not make you weak. Your humility is not surprising. And your listening is a choice, not a cage. Machiavelli would remind you, the world isn't shaped by the words people say to you. It's shaped by the meanings you accept. The world is full of people who want to define you, not because they know you, but because it makes them feel safe. Predictable people are easier to manage. Labels are easier to control than complexity. That's why every day people try to put you in a box, the smart one, the humble one, the funny one, the nice one. And once you're in that box, they can relax. They know what to expect from you. They know how to predict your reactions. And in a world obsessed with control, predictability is power. But here's the problem. The moment you accept their label, you surrender the right to define yourself. You start living in their version of your story, not your own. Machiavelli knew this all too well. In Renaissance courts, power wasn't just about armies or wealth. It was about perception. Rulers were destroyed not by what they did, but by what others expected them to do. The more predictable you are, the easier it is to build a trap in your path. The moment your enemies know where you'll step next, they can plant the blade beneath it. In modern life, the same dynamic plays out quietly. When people expect you to always be cheerful, they'll ignore your seriousness. When they expect you to always be humble, they'll misinterpret your confidence. And when they expect you to always be kind, they'll walk over your boundaries, never imagining that you might say no. That is how compliments over time limit your freedom. They shape your role, your behavior, your identity, until you become a caricature of yourself. The true Machiavellian response is not rebellion, it's unpredictability, refusing to be caged by what people expect. Some days you are warm, some days you are cold, sometimes you speak, sometimes you remain silent, but always on your terms, never because someone else framed your options. Ask yourself daily, am I doing this because it's who I am or because it's who they expect me to be? If the answer is the latter, step back. Reset. Redefine. True power comes from fluid identity, the ability to shift, adapt, and stay untouchable. Machiavelli would remind you your greatest weapon is not charm, kindness, or talent. It is the ability to move outside the frame before anyone knows it exists. In the end, all power games come down to one question: who defines whom? Do you shape how others see you, or do they shape how you see yourself? And nowhere is this battle quieter, more invisible than in compliments. That's why the final and greatest defense against manipulation isn't confrontation. It's not standing on a table and announcing your truth. It's something much colder, much stronger: silence. Quiet, intentional, strategic silence. When someone flatters you, they expect something in return. Gratitude, validation, a smile that says, "Yes, I believe you." But when you give them that reaction, you close the trap yourself. Because they're not just complimenting you, they're writing your role. And every smile, every thank you, every bit of emotional openness you give them confirms that the role fits, that you'll wear it without protest, But when you stay silent, when you smile without agreeing, when you listen without absorbing, you break the frame. They're left wondering, did that compliment land? Did it work? Are they playing along or playing me? That uncertainty is power. Because the person they can't read is the person they can't control. Machiavelli didn't fear insults, he feared compliments. Because insults reveal themselves instantly, but compliments sneak past your defenses. They come wrapped in kindness, dipped in honey, impossible to hate but easy to obey. The Renaissance courts weren't lost to sword fights. They were lost to flattery whispered in corridors. And today's battlefields aren't much different. They're just digital social psychological. So how do you keep your power intact by mastering your response? You don't need to reject compliments with bitterness that's predictable and emotional. You don't need to explain your worth that's defensive and weak. You simply receive the words but refuse the role. Smile outwardly. Stay free inwardly. And the most important thing, never build your identity on praise. Because the person who needs praise becomes addicted to the giver. But the person who stands whole without it, that person becomes untouchable. Machiavelli would leave you with this: power is not something you seize in noise. It is something you preserve in silence. The next time someone flatters you, smile. But remember, real power isn't handed to you. It's what you keep when they try to take it away with kindness. Here's the hard truth: not every compliment you receive is meant to empower you. Some are crafted to quietly place limits on who you're allowed to be. In a world obsessed with labels, people will define you with kindness so they can control you without conflict. You'll hear, "You're so humble," which sounds sweet until the day you assert yourself and they call it arrogance. You'll hear, "You always brighten the room," which feels like love until you have a bad day and they question your worth. Slowly, these compliments box you in, turning your personality into a role, your growth into a performance. The lesson is simple, but life-changing: own your identity. Don't let other people's words, no matter how flattering, define the limits of your behavior. True power comes from knowing who you are when no one is watching and refusing to let praise become your leash. Smile at the compliment. Thank them if you wish, but never forget who you were before they labeled you. In your relationships, your career, and your personal growth, stay aware of the roles people try to place you in. Ask yourself daily, am I doing this because it's truly me, or because it's what they expect of me? That one question alone can save you from years of living someone else's story. If this message made you pause, reflect, or see your own life differently, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so we can keep learning, reflecting, and protecting our power together. And if you've ever broken free from someone's quiet control, tell your story in the comments below. You never know who it might help.